Let's all pray her little business experiment lasts longer than the cake. That's what my father said into the microphone at my wedding. He didn't hesitate before saying it. He didn't soften it. He delivered it the way he delivers quarterly summaries, confidently, as if the conclusion had already been agreed upon. There was a pause. Then the laughter came. Not sharp. Not hostile. Just easy. The kind of laughter people offer when someone with authority signals that it's safe. The cake had already been cut. The lights were warm and low. My husband's family sat closest to the stage, still learning the unspoken hierarchy of mine. My father smiled, satisfied with the rhythm of the room. He added that marriage was the real investment. That spreadsheets were fine for hobbies. That stability mattered more than ambition. Someone near the front clapped. My mother adjusted her shawl and avoided eye contact. My brother stared at his plate. A cousin leaned toward her husband and whispered something that made him smile. No one interrupted him. No one corrected the word little. I kept my posture straight. I lifted my glass when everyone else did. I did not explain that due diligence had already cleared. I did not mention that acquisition documents were sitting in my inbox, awaiting final signatures. I did not correct scale. That's when I understood something had shifted. I used to believe moments like that were harmless. Just humor. Just family dynamics playing out the way they always had. But sometimes a joke is simply a summary of how someone sees you. If you've ever been the dependable one, the practical one, the person who solves problems quietly but is never introduced with admiration, you probably recognize that feeling. If this resonates, you can subscribe and share your experience in the comments. I read them carefully. Have you ever been useful in someone's life, but never fully respected in it? I wasn't angry that night. I was precise. In my family, authority had a clear shape. My father built a regional logistics company over 30 years. Warehouses, truck fleets, physical infrastructure that people could see and touch. He valued tangibility. If something did not require steel or fuel or signatures in person, he considered it theoretical. My older brother absorbed that worldview early. He spoke with certainty even when he lacked information. He learned that volume often substitutes for evidence. I occupied a different role. I was the reasonable one. At 14, when my father missed a utilities payment and blamed the bank, I built a color-coded billing tracker so it would not happen again. At 16, I created a spreadsheet comparing my brother's college programs because he said the brochures were too long. At 19, I completed my parents' online tax filings because portals felt confusing to them. No one formally asked me to do these things. They simply paused until I stepped forward. Reliability became my identity. When I launched my analytics firm at 23, my father called it a phase. He preferred the word real for forklifts and loading docks. I did not argue. In our system, disagreement signaled disrespect. Compliance signaled maturity. So I attended dinners. I listened to advice I had already evaluated. I nodded when he suggested backup employment options. They tolerated my ambition because it did not threaten visible hierarchy. As long as I remained helpful, I was not disruptive. Respect, however, was reserved for those who controlled rooms. I observed the pattern. Patterns become predictable. Predictability creates openings. My company began with 2 employees and a rented office above a pharmacy. We built predictive models for mid-sized distributors using machine learning tools that traditional operators had not yet integrated. My father never asked how the models worked. But he did ask for favors. Could I review a vendor contract? Could I explain a dashboard to his operations team? Could I analyze delayed shipment metrics? I always agreed. I reviewed his contracts carefully. I identified inefficiencies in routing. I suggested minor timing adjustments that improved margins. He presented the improvements as internal refinements. I did not correct attribution. Access to data creates awareness. Over time, I understood his company's structure more clearly than he realized. Debt schedules, supplier concentration, variable rate exposure, cash flow timing. I did not react emotionally to what I saw. I catalogued it. Helping is rarely audited. Silence is often misunderstood. People assume it signals weakness. It can also signal calculation. If I had corrected him at the wedding, I would have confirmed his narrative that I was defensive, sensitive, overreaching. Silence preserved access. Compliance maintained proximity. Proximity allowed observation. Arrogance makes people sloppy. When someone believes you pose no structural risk, they stop filtering what you see. I did not need public validation. I needed timing. 2 days after the wedding, We hosted a smaller brunch for extended relatives. My father referenced the speech himself. "I hope you know I was joking," he said loudly. "Entrepreneurship is adorable at this stage of life. Stability is what lasts." An aunt asked how my project was going. Before I could answer, he responded, "Still in testing, I imagine." It wasn't. The acquisition had moved to final legal review that morning. My brother leaned back in his chair. "At least she married someone with a stable income," he added. The laughter returned. Familiar. Predictable. I folded my napkin carefully. "It's going well," I said. Later that afternoon, my father pulled me aside near the kitchen entrance. "If it doesn't work out," he said quietly, "there's always space in operations. I'll make room." He believed he was offering security. I thanked him. They didn't realize what they had just handed me. The acquisition closed 3 weeks after the wedding. The buyer was a national logistics technology firm expanding into predictive analytics. The valuation exceeded my father's annual revenue. I did not announce it immediately. Instead, I organized structure. Signed agreements were scanned into a folder labeled final_closing_ documents. Wire confirmations were stored on an encrypted drive. Board transition emails were archived under a thread titled Governance. I reviewed every clause regarding equity retention, advisory roles, and non-compete limitations. 2 months later, the press release went live. Industry blogs covered it first. Then a national business publication ran a feature. My inbox shifted overnight. Investors. Conference invitations. Partnership inquiries. My father forwarded the article to relatives with a brief message. Proud of her persistence. The word little disappeared. Relatives began using Visionary. I responded politely. Meanwhile, I reviewed another data set. My father's company had entered an aggressive expansion funded by variable rate debt. Supplier concentration had increased from 3 primary vendors to 1 dominant contract. Liquidity projections assumed stable interest conditions. I confirmed the numbers against public filings and industry forecasts. I built a spreadsheet mapping rate adjustments against cash flow exposure over 12 months. The gap was measurable. Significant. I did not intervene. Preparation replaces reaction. My phone buzzed on a Thursday evening while I was reviewing quarterly analytics. His name appeared. "We should talk." I called him back. He congratulated me again. His tone was controlled, almost formal. Then he explained that expansion had created temporary pressure. "A short-term bridge," he said. "Nothing serious." He asked if I would consider investing. A family opportunity. He assumed alignment. He assumed gratitude. He assumed compliance. I asked for detailed statements. He hesitated before agreeing. When the documents arrived, they confirmed exposure higher than described. He required restructuring, not just liquidity. I agreed to meet. Agreement activates systems. We met in his office the following Monday. The same office where I had once been offered backup employment. He outlined the amount required. He framed it as temporary assistance. I listened without interrupting. Then I explained that any investment from me would require equity conversion, board oversight, and operational transparency. "That feels excessive," he said. "It's standard," I replied. I placed a structured term sheet on his desk. Measured. Protective. Non-emotional. Liquidity now depended on my signature. There were no raised voices. Only recalibration. He declined initially. Within weeks, interest rates adjusted upward. A supplier reduced credit exposure. A financing covenant triggered an audit requiring additional disclosure. Cash reserves narrowed faster than projected. He called again. This time, his tone was direct. We revised minor details, but governance controls remained intact. I invested through a holding entity. Board oversight became formal. Monthly reporting became mandatory. Operational transparency was no longer optional. Within industry circles, the restructuring was described as strategic alignment. At family dinners, language shifted. My brother asked technical questions instead of making jokes. My mother avoided commentary entirely. No one referenced the wedding speech. Authority had moved from volume to documentation. It appeared in revised org charts, in board minutes, in signatures required at the bottom of every major decision. I did not celebrate. Stability, after all, is what lasts. 6 months later, operations stabilized under revised controls. My role transitioned from proximity to governance. After a quarterly review meeting, I walked alone through the warehouse. The air smelled like cardboard and fuel. Concrete floors. Fluorescent lights. Once, this had defined legitimacy in my father's vocabulary. I left my visitor badge at reception. Aligned with policy. No announcement. No speech. I stepped outside. The parking lot was quiet. I got into my car and drove home. Public humiliation rarely changes outcomes. It clarifies perception. At my wedding, my father categorized me as temporary. Small. Experimental. He believed hierarchy was secure because it had always been visible. What he did instead was define it clearly enough for me to measure. Clarity removes illusion. My business was never an experiment. It was preparation. Preparation for independence. Preparation for optionality. Preparation for conversations where approval was no longer required. When my phone buzzed that Thursday evening, it was not a reversal. It was continuation. He thought he embarrassed me. He introduced leverage. I no longer correct public narratives. Structures speak without raising their voice. Respect obtained quietly tends to remain. Some shifts are invisible in laughter. They surface later. In contracts. In governance. In silence where jokes once felt automatic. I did not win. I recalibrated. And that distinction is irreversible.